Hi everyone, it's Dr. Echo Rivera, and I'm really excited because today we are going to do a before and after makeover. I absolutely love doing these, and I'm able to do this one today thanks to Andrea, who submitted her slides. Andrea works for a government agency, and this PowerPoint is intended to showcase some new technology at a professional conference. And what I like to do for this slide makeover series is focus on, spending 30 minutes or less to improve some slides and give some slides a redesign and spruce them up a little bit. So I asked, which slides are sort of the trouble slides? Which ones are you struggling with the most? And what she said was, let's go to slide sorter view. What she said was slides 7, 11, 13, and 15. So I was able to come up with ideas to do a little redesign for all of these. So let's go ahead and walk through what I did. So this was the first slide that was giving her trouble, but we're starting sort of in the presentation a little bit. So just to give everybody some context, basically this section here of the presentation is sort of setting the stage for what the problem is. So it's talking about basically an outdated research tool or an outdated research approach, where before, step 1 was the public called, and then step 2, we had to look up this thing. Step 3, we had to find this thing in this in this PDF, and then we had to find, select pages from this PDF, and then we had to email the person back, right? So again, setting up sort of the stage of what life is like before this new tool that was developed. Perfect. I absolutely loved this. I loved seeing the screenshots of all the different files that they have to sort through. And then there's some animations in here that I do want to show. So, you sort of click, and then there's an arrow pointing at this part where we need this, and then click, and oh my goodness, here's all the files that we have to sort through, and click. Oh, here's the file that we're looking for, right? And we're zooming in with new screenshots, and everything is sort of being walked through using these animations. So, high five, thumbs up. I absolutely loved this. And hopefully, I wanted to share this because I think a lot of people might struggle with how do I visualize certain things? How do I visualize a process, especially if it does involve something like this, where it's all text or documents. This is a perfect example. So we even have a screenshot of writing an email. I can really see myself actually going through this, even though I personally haven't, right? This is all new to me. So yeah, this is fantastic, excellent job. So yeah, that's kind of what leads up to this sort of final slide, which is we can do better than this. Problem 1 is there's too much information and clutter, so it's time consuming. Click. Problem 2, there's functional limitations, and so this is creating a barrier to public access. Okay, so this was the problem slide, and I will say that, on first glance, I was sort of I'm not entirely sure, why this is a problem slide. We don't have walls of text. We've got, I like the arrow that shows the connection between the problem and sort of the outcome. There's too much information and clutter, which leads to time-consuming research. And again, it's just, it's not overwhelming, and it seemed like a good representation of the content. So I would say that, honestly, this slide does kind of feel like, if it's your first time presenting, I would probably leave this as is, honestly. But there are always some ways that we can improve slides, especially if we're going to repeat this, we're going to present this over and over again, or we just really want as many slides to be high level as possible. So, with that in mind, of course, I did have some ideas to spruce it up. So we'll first start with some things that I noticed that could be improved with this slide. So the first thing was maybe the title itself. It's kind of vague. It's not a takeaway, and it's sort of a little, I don't know. I was just we could probably make this stronger. We could probably make the audience a little bit more yeah, we want this outcome, versus oh, we could do better. So that was kind of one thing where I'm I'm wanting to maybe do something that's stronger, a takeaway, something more like a headline. And then the second part is, while I was reviewing the script, there is sort of this emphasis on the problem being more the process rather than the negative outcome itself. So if we look at the slide, right, the problems, the things that are bolded, the things that are red are just like the process. So too much clutter. Really, I could see the audience being a little more invested if we highlight the negative outcome a little bit more. So, time-consuming research is something that maybe I would actually bold and emphasize more than too much clutter or too much information. So kind of emphasizing the end, the negative outcome more so than the process. So these were some things where I'm like, well, maybe we can tweak this a little bit. And what we have here with this slide is it is sort of like it's like a summary slide, and it's preparing us to transition into the next section. So first of all, I want to say, thank you for including this. A lot of people don't include something like this. They might end with step 5 and then just move into the next section of the presentation. So the fact that you even included this transition moment here, a moment to kind of pause and reflect on the issue and how we're going to move forward, definitely include that. With that in mind, I did sort of think about all of these slides. When I'm trying to improve a slide, when I'm trying to redesign a slide, I do look at just that slide itself. And I do think of, how can I improve this design? But I often also look at sort of the whole subsection that we are considering. And I think about both the slide design itself and the storyboard. And what I noticed right here in this, section of the presentation, right here in this storyboard, is that the steps are only shown separately. Step 1 is slide 2. Step 1 is slide 2. Step 2 is slide 3, right? Each step has its own slide. And that's it. And then we do kind of move into a summary transition slide. But what I'm not seeing on that slide is all of these 5 steps together in one visual. And this, especially when I looked at sort of the later part of the presentation where we are talking about the new tool and that kind of thing, there's sort of this missed opportunity here to show a visual for the existing outdated process, which you can then use later on to show a visual version of the new process. So people can visually get an idea of how different they truly are and be even more excited about this new tool and how it's going to, be even more efficient. So I'm kind of like, I think we can sort of solve this problem of slide number 7 being an issue and take advantage of and sort of fix this missed opportunity. Let me show you what I mean by showing you what I did for the makeover. So basically what I did was I created a slide to show the steps all together in one slide. And I loved the visuals. They were already perfect for this. So all I had to do was take a circle and then crop out a circle from that visual. I have a whole video where I talk about how to do this, where I talk about how to crop different things inside your PowerPoint presentation. So I basically just used that to take a circle from each of the 5 steps, and then that became the visual for this slide. And then I added a few keywords for each of the steps. And so now we have kind of this summary where, again, everybody can sort of visualize the whole process all together. And then I used the top part of the slide to create more of a headline to capture what was on the original slide, but in a way that gets to the key points and again focuses maybe a little bit more on the negative consequences rather than the process. So it says this outdated process requires time-consuming research and creates barriers to public access. And I did create a backup option just in case there was an interest in breaking this information out into multiple slides. So what we could do is just a summary slide. We're not making a key point just yet. We've just presented each 5 steps separately, and then we end on this. So the heading is just the 5+ step outdated process. And the plus sign is there to reflect what's sort of at that bottom in gray, because there was something inside the notes where it was if the records are incomplete, that this, like, there are actually more steps involved. We have to do further research, that kind of thing. So that's how I added it in there. So it is represented in the visual, but it doesn't necessarily get added as a full step because sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's not a step that has to be completed. So we could just kind of, again, like we show each piece separately and then we end on this summary slide. And then we can use that slide itself as the visual for the next slide, which is, more of a one-to-one replacement for the original. So we've changed the heading from "We can do better" to "This 5-step outdated process creates 2 key problems for staff and the public." And then we're using the outdated process visual, like, as sort of the cause, as sort of the visual. So we have an arrow pointing to what used to be there before. And then it was behind an animation. So click, right? Too much information and clutter that leads to time-consuming research. Click, functional limitations, barrier to public access. So those are a couple options for, updating and revising this slide. Here's the before. And again, here's one of the afters where we can, basically put all this information inside the heading of the slide, but then change the visual. So it is a visual summary of the different steps. Or we could do something more like this, where we break it into multiple slides. And we still have that information on there. Too much information and clutter, time-consuming research, functional limitations, barrier to public access. Like, it is all still there, but now we have a visual, and that visual is the 5 steps. All right, so moving on to the next slide that was giving her some trouble. So it's this slide here where it says, like, dream number 3 at the top. Key information is available on demand to anyone. And it's a little, we have a metaphor here. So the notes are: the final part of the dream was ensuring that key information that already existed would be available on demand to anyone, essentially helping themselves to the information at their convenience, like what you do when checking the flight board at the airport. So there is a metaphor running throughout the presentation about, flights and planes and stuff like that. And I really liked that. I think metaphors are definitely a great idea. And I instantly understood, and connected with this example, this visual, and that metaphor. So, just to kind of back up so you know where this is all coming from. It's basically the next section of the presentation after we just, after the makeover that we just did, we move into sort of like the dream. Okay, so if we have all these problems, if the process is so cumbersome, here's the dream. Here's what we want to do instead. Dream number 1, we want fewer steps so, people can get what they need fast. And the connection to the metaphor is like, we want passengers to check in easily and go straight to their gates without hassle. And I absolutely love this. We've got a great photo. It's large, and we have and look how simple it was to edit this photo. You're just adding a text box here on the screen, but that's how we can edit photos to make it match our content, and just to be like, to work with the example that we need. So I absolutely loved that. Dream number 2 is like, let's not do this. like, let's not have this happen anymore. And then that's what led us to dream number 3. So let's walk through some things that I noted that we can improve. Okay. So, this slide that I'm going to make over is part of a series. So here's all 3 of those slides in this series. Now, the first 2, we've got a full, the image is basically the entire slide. Thumbs up. I absolutely love seeing that whenever we can do that. And then I think the trouble came in because this image is not a full slide. And that led to some other challenges with like, okay, well, where do I put the text now? And I've got that, box for dream number 3. And so it did kind of have this ripple effect on making other parts of the design a challenge, because really, these first 2 slides, they look great. So when I looked at this, I'm like, oh, we probably just need to make that image bigger, and that might actually solve the issue. Plus, I would say that these boxes for like dream number 1, dream number 2, dream number 3, they're not really necessary. And I think they're actually doing a little bit more harm than good, because it is probably part of the reason why this final slide became such a struggle, because like we have a visual, it is taking up a good part of the slide, but on the other slide we have these two like text boxes with different styles, and then that's probably where the challenge came in. So they're not really helping. So here's what I did for the makeover of this series. I pretty much just removed that box. So, you know, this slide looks almost identical, but we don't have dream number 1 at the top. Same for this one, the animations are still there, but we don't have dream number 2 at the top. Which then, here we go with the actual slide that was part of the challenge. All I did was make the image take up the full slide. And then I took that text and I put it there in a way where it is easy to see. So that's pretty much it. Very small change. It took me like a couple seconds to do this, but it's going to make much more of an impact, and the design is a lot more like streamlined and really lets that visual shine through. I think one thing that I see a lot when I work with clients is if the image is already a portrait, like this original stock photo is, people often feel like they have to leave it as a portrait. Or maybe in this case, it was sort of the desire or thinking that we had to show the full suitcase in the photo to really connect with the metaphor. But as you can see here, we can still we can still pretty much tell what's going on. We are all kind of used to this. So we do see enough. We see her holding onto something and it looks like a luggage handle. And, you know, this board here with information is pretty unique to a setting like traveling. So, you know, maybe it's a train station, maybe it's an airport, it doesn't really matter. So we still get all the key information that we need on this slide, and we are able to keep all of the text, and the design matches the other ones as well. So here's all of them together. So again, I did not have to make very many changes to this, but that one tweak really does help make that third one no longer stand out as being different, or, you know, having the design not look as good as the other one. All right, so let's move on to the final 2 slides, which are actually part of the same section. So we're going to do this together. So here's the first one, which is basically talking about a partner that they pulled in to help make the new tool. And like, this is who that partner is. Of course, some information has been, you know, anonymized, redacted, and that kind of thing. And then there was a slide talking about their role, like what they did for developing the tool. And it is set behind an appear animation. So click, 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 click. Okay. So again, you know, when we have slides that are text, this is absolutely a good thing to do. You know, thumbs up to having simple animations to walk people through the information. And again, I am seeing a connection here. You know, there's like the partners were like the pilot, the cockpit designer, you know, there's like cockpit designers and instrument engineers. So again, let's go ahead and talk through some of the things that I thought we could improve for this series. So the first thing is, again, you know, I'm always taking time to read through the script because, you know, slide design needs to match the script. Your slides are a complement to what you're saying. They're a visual representation of what you're saying. So I took some time to kind of look through the script and again, the metaphor that is being used here for like flights and that kind of thing. And I thought this would be a perfect thing to include in this video because, you know, just sort of like a tip for anybody who is working on slides. So literally like everybody watching this video. I do love metaphors, and I was really excited about that last example of like checking the flight status because that made a lot of sense. And metaphors are great for like quick examples or inspiration, like when you really want to inspire your audience, when you want to have an emotional impact with them, or you're explaining something complex. And also pause, I do realize I might be mixing up metaphor with analogy here, so you can go ahead and leave comments if I'm supposed to be saying analogy here, that's fine. But I think most people will get what I mean by talking about this. So yeah, that's when you want to use things like metaphors or analogies, right? It is typically used in educational presentations, conference presentations, research presentations. They are typically used to explain something complex. And in this situation here, we do have 2 full slides that are sort of taken and dedicated to using this metaphor. Like the visuals, the content on the slide are pretty much all about using the language or showing the visual of the metaphor. But when I look inside the script, and I've just highlighted it there in orange, and it's easy to miss because really not much is actually said about the metaphor. And more importantly, as I read through the script, and I read through it a few times just to really understand it, I really was not feeling like the metaphor was necessary for this. I felt like, we're just talking about a sort of like standard project, like how the project unfolded, who did what. And that's something that I think any audience in a conference will completely understand. And so, it felt like a lot of time and visuals and space was being dedicated to a metaphor that wasn't quite necessary. And we could probably drop the metaphor for these set series, for these set slides, and really tighten up this script. I think you can sort of see the script here on the screen. And when I was thinking through it and doing some editing, I was able to cut it down by about half. So I'm like, we really have room here to be just, as concise as possible. So here's what I ended up doing for the makeover. So I started here with this section slide. And again, this slide is here to let the audience know we're moving from one section to the next. And I love section slides. You can see me use them on almost any of my videos where I'm sort of just like talking about a topic. Basically, any video that's not a PowerPoint tutorial. I will often have those. So that's sort of where we are with this slide. And you can see here that the slide before it, again, that was the original slide, is the one that we just remade. So basically we just talked about like dream 1, fewer steps, dream 2, we don't have to do this anymore, dream 3, they can, access the information on their own. And then we get to this section slide here, where the script is, this dream led to our ticket to the future in developing a tool using a customized GIS tool. So the wording is a little tricky. And really it is about the dream that we just learned about. So what I did was I removed this as a section slide and instead made it more of a summary of these previous slides. So kind of like what we just did, right? We're presenting things separately, right? Dream 1 is separate, dream 2 is separate, dream 3 is separate. Well, where's our summary of these, like something to visually connect these 3. So that's pretty much what I did. And again, just to kind of show you what it would be like if you were in the audience, right? I would first say, okay, so here's dream 1. I would explain dream 1. Here's dream 2. I would then explain dream 2. Here's dream 3. I would explain dream 3. And then this. So I would, again, end with a summary of all of them. And then what is shown here, like the text that's shown here, is the script from that section slide. So it's like these 3 dreams led to the map tool, a custom GIS tool. So again, just sort of showing you what I mean. So before we had like the 3 dream slides and then the section slide. And then what I did was I replaced that with, again, like a visual summary of those 3 dreams being together. And I tightened up the script just a little bit. And then the second part of the makeover was to just really streamline this to the essential information that is needed. And really the essential information is, okay, there were sort of like 2 departments or 2 groups that worked on this like major hub and then us. And really what this is trying to describe is who did what. Well, for that, we can actually just have a very simple like compare and contrast slide where they're over here on the left, we're over here on the right, and we can just sort of click through, click, 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 click. And just, again, it's just the key words, the key points of the point of the slide, which is who these groups are and what did they do. And we can probably go through this rather quickly. So that's how the makeover ended up unfolding for these last 2 slides. It's really funny because typically when I am doing before and after makeovers, I will often take one slide and I have to turn that into multiple slides. But here, Andrea already did a really good job of breaking information up so that we don't have one slide that is too overwhelming. So I really liked actually being able to have an example where I'm like, maybe we actually are using just, too many. And we can sort of condense that and condense the script and just put it all on one slide. So here's the before and after all of the slides. Again, the focus of this makeover series is to really try to do design work that takes 30 minutes or less, because I want to show that even just a couple changes, just a couple revisions, just a little bit of an update can actually go a long way. And what we've done with this makeover is we have increased some visuals, made some information easier to see, but we've also added things like visual summaries, like this visual 5-step process. And we use this as a chance to tighten up that script just a little bit more, which just does bring me to one final point. So after where we left off with like our role, this is sort of the next section was more about the project and how they wanted to make sure, because information changes, like updates need to happen. And then we get to the new tool. So that's the flight plan. This is the new tool. And again, visually walking through how this new tool works. People can go and search, they can click, they've got the document, it's all there, and then they are able to, get to these pages that they need. So I mentioned this earlier, but this would be a perfect opportunity to show this visual once again and remind the audience, okay, so this is what we used to have to do. And then change this visual model to the current new process. And then that is how you can visually show them the actual difference. Like now, look, it's literally 3 steps. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but again, you can just visually show the change. It went from 5 steps to 3 steps, or maybe we've removed that possible extra step of if it's incomplete, future research is, or more research is required, or again, maybe it's the same amount of steps but more information is sent, or maybe it's a similar amount of steps but like it's faster, right? Whatever it is, use this as a chance to connect them to the old original visual and then show them how that visual is changing thanks to the new tool. That is a great way to show the audience the before and after of what life is like before something like this, before the new tool, and why this new tool is so exciting and so good to have. All right, that wraps up the makeover. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you got some new ideas from the redesign. And yeah, this is kind of the thing that happens during one-on-one sessions with me. We just go through and we update, we redesign, and I will look at the script and I will look for opportunities to maybe move some things around and make the storyboard just a little bit tighter. And I'll just look for ways to connect visuals like that, build visual themes like we were talking about with the 5 steps and showing how those change at the end. I mean, this is what I can help you with during a one-on-one session. These are also the skills that I teach you in my masterclass. So if you want to be able to do this on your own, definitely check out my presentation skills masterclass because I will show you how to do this. I always have some type of free training that is available to help you get started. So check the description. All the links are there. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. That does still help even in this decade that we're in. So thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.